For most people, their idea of heaven involves going up to a place. But for me, every day when I go down into the Duckworth Collection, that's my idea of heaven, walking down those stairs and going in to where there is over 18,000 specimens. Ever since I was a little girl, I had a great passion for skulls, for bones, for skeletons, and was just enraptured with this idea of being able to tell stories of people who lived long, long time ago, deep in the past, about their lives through their bodies. My name is Ronica Power, and I work here at the University of Cambridge in the Leverhulme Centre for Human Evolutionary Studies. I'm a biocultural archaeologist, and what a biocultural archaeologist does is to focus on data derived from the analysis of human remains, but use them in conjunction with every other aspect of the archaeological record to form a more holistic view of the human past. One of the projects that we're doing here in the Duckworth Collection is the Trans-Sahara project, to better understand the mobility, diet and lifestyle patterns of ancient populations across the Sahara Desert. As a means to test some of those ideas, we're examining 120 pre-Dynastic Egyptians, which is actually just a small section of the extraordinary collection that we have of ancient Egyptian human remains here at the Duckworth. I have to say, every single time I look into the face of one of these Egyptians from around about 5000 BC, I can't help but wonder and imagine what their lives must have been like. It's always such an amazing, exhilarating experience to come face to face with someone who was around at the time of the formation of the Egyptian state. It's an extraordinary experience. So the kind of work that I do is to capture the morphological features of this skull using 3D geometric morphometrics. I do this for individuals, and then I do it for all of the populations that we have. And then we compare the data and to see whether or not there are similarities and differences between the populations, and then give us an idea about how much there might have been movement between these groups. I also look at the isotopic data derived from the study of these individuals. And the way that I do that is to take very tiny scrapings of tooth enamel and analyse it chemically. Isotopic data tells us a lot about people's diet, people's mobility. In terms of diet, we can tell what they ate, what kinds of plants they ate, and we can tell what parts of the world that they lived in by studying their oxygen isotopes and also their strontium isotopes. The interesting thing about the tooth enamel is that it tells us where the person lived when they grew up and what sort of foods that they ate when they grew up. Tooth enamel is a fixed substance and it doesn't change throughout life. And this is different to bone in that bone changes in around about a 10-year cycle. And so if I'd like to know where the person grew up, I can test their tooth enamel. But if I'd like to know where they've been more recently, I take a look at their bones. The Leverhulme Centre for Human Evolutionary Studies houses the Duckworth Collection, which is one of the major anthropological, archaeological collections of human skeletal remains and other associated materials, not only in the UK, but in the entire world. We have skulls, we have skeletons, we have mummies, we have death masks, we've got blood samples. Anything that you can imagine in terms of working with the human body, we have here at the Duckworth. One of the key things that we're interested in is considering the interconnectedness of people. And it's a really unique way to test some of those theories and ideas by actually seeing the stories that their bodies can tell about who they were and where they're from. So here we are in the Duckworth Collection, and as you can see, we have row upon row, stack upon stack of human remains. Amongst them, we have some material that was excavated from an Iron Age hill fort here in England. This skull tells an incredible story. This is an adult male, and we can tell from the lesions on his skull that he was involved in violent episodes before he died. This first one here indicates that he was involved in a battle and received a sword cut to his head, but it wasn't enough to kill him. We can tell this because there's some evidence of healing around the lesion. Sometime later though, he was involved in another violent episode, and we can see this sword cut to the back of the head with a radiating fracture was probably the last thing that he experienced in his life. And this is just one of the amazing stories we have here.
So the Duckworth Collection is super rich. As you know, it has just around 18,000 remains, and among them there's a group that's special. And the reason they're special is they are human heads, like many of the thousands that we have. But these have been treated by the people who held them, or either the relatives or the communities around them. They treated them. So I'll show you an example, which is this head from Vanuatu, the molecular heads. And these heads are super special. So here's the original skull. So somebody died and they buried. Usually they would bury the person and such, and then retrieve the bones once they were dry. But then once they retrieved them, they made a plaster face. This is a particular clay with straw and so on, to not only cover the front of the head, but to actually approximate the features of the dead person, so that they could have in their shelves, in their houses, or bring out for a ritual, a particular ceremony, that person who'd gone would now be back there with its face. If the teeth were no longer there, they would replace them with a tooth of an animal, or maybe an animal they liked in particular. They would put pig teeth or sticks of wood and so on. And in this case, all the colors. So, but this head originally was already different, because if you can see, it's elongated. Right? So when this person was a child, they actually bound the head, both at the front and here, so that it would grow in this particular shape. They must have thought it was the coolest thing ever, to actually have a funny shaped head like this. So this is one case. But now look, let's look at this one, which is the same island, the same people, and look at those features. And you can immediately, you get such a sense of the person, there's somebody else there. So in this part of the world, the dead persons, they never quite disappeared. In this case, I mean, we know this is a child, because we can look at the teeth, and as you can see, the full set of teeth has not erupted yet, so it's probably a young teenager who died. We cannot tell if it's a boy or a girl, but we can tell how old it is. So this child as well, the bones were retrieved, and then they were painted red in ochre. And it was carried at the back of a relative. So they would put it on the head and just carry in your back this dead child, or any other person. I'll give you a last example of the decorated heads, and is this one from Papua New Guinea. And this is entirely different yet again. So this has no clay, no painting. It has been smoked. So you can see that it has been smoked and it's all turned dark. And its main feature is that it has an engraving on the frontal bone. And this engraving relates to the hunter's identity. So somebody hunted this person. So this is a victim of a raid, of which it was common in that part of the world and many other parts of the world. And the drawing on the forehead is part of the hunter's process of dealing with this dead person that is now part of his hunting record. So 3 examples from the Duckworth of how people around the world differ in how we deal with death, how we deal with human remains, and what role they play among the living.
I'm Maggie Belatti. I've been working in the Duckworth Collection for 20 years as the chief technician, and I have the privilege to be working with all these lovely bones. So in this box we have femurs from Farringdon Street, London, part of the 17th century plague pit collection. And it's very interesting because these long bones can tell us the occupation of the person. So this bone here, you can see, has a very, very nasty a piece of extra bone here, and we call these cobbler's thighs or cobbler's femurs. You can see there's a huge extra deposition of bone here, and now this would have been where the cobbler was continually hitting and banging his leg while he was mending shoes or doing something with the leather. We can also even tell from this is a left femur, and he would have to have been right-handed to have done that.
Our collections here in the Duckworth are not just limited to skeletal material, and from ancient Egypt we also have an extraordinary collection of ancient Egyptian mummified heads. We can study their biology, we can consider their health, but also very importantly from broader archaeological perspectives, studying ancient Egyptian mummies gives us insights into their technological practices, into their medical practices and therapies, but also we can tell a lot about their religious beliefs, about their social behaviours, and most importantly about their culture. The work that I'm doing here in the Duckworth Collection is actually just one of the many, many projects that are happening here at the moment. We have researchers coming from across the world. Every day we have people downstairs in the collection working, using different aspects, testing different ideas. It's an extraordinary place. And everybody comes with a different question. Everybody comes with a different angle. But the beauty of it is that everybody's interested in telling stories about human life, about human history and the human past. Not only who we were, where we were, but also importantly, where we came from.